name's Kelsey. I lead product marketing at Braze, and I'm very excited to be joined by Sean at Bilt. We're going to jump in on all things retention. I'm going to kick things off with just a quick overview of some of the trends that we're seeing that brands are taking across the industry, and then I'll turn it over to Sean to talk a little bit about how they're tackling it at the on the Bilt side. So with that, I'm curious to set the stage in this room. How many of you have a goal at your company that's focused around profitability versus just pure revenue? Just a couple of hands. We're starting to see, I think, a shift in the last year or so, especially with the macroeconomic conditions, to really focus on not just revenue growth, but also how do we do so in a sustainable and profitable way. And there's been a lot of back and forth, I think, and actually we were just chatting about this, around customer acquisition versus retention, and how do you balance investing in both, and where should you be spending your dollars? And interestingly, we've actually seen over the past few years that there has been a shift to drive a lot more investment into retention versus that customer acquisition. So in 2022, the number of brands who are spending over half their marketing budgets on retention was actually closer to 33%. So we are seeing a much heavier shift in how do we want to spend our marketing dollars across the acquisition and retention spectrum. And I think this stat is probably why, or a big reason why, right? It costs 5 to 7 times more to acquire customers than it does to retain them. And so as we're thinking about how we're balancing those different programs, how do we think about spending dollars, and how do we think about the ROI that we're going to see across our current customer versus bringing new brands in, or consumers in? I also thought this was an interesting one. So increasing retention can, by 5%, this is a very wide range, but between 25 and 95% profitability boost if you do focus on just moving the needle on retention by even a very small amount. So cutting to the chase, I wanted to walk through just 3 different strategies we have seen brands take to start to move the needle on some of that retention. I'll walk through these really briefly, and then again, Sean's going to share a little bit more about how they're actually doing this at Bilt. So first and foremost, we'll talk a little bit more about how do you identify potential factors that might indicate someone is at risk for churn. Second, how do you start to deliver personalized experiences that are relevant to them in those different moments of their consumer journey? And then finally, we'll talk about the different channels that you might use to reach them. So one thing I wanted to call out, there's a lot of different ways that you can measure retention, right? There's classic retention, there's different ways that you can measure it. So if you are a brand that maybe has more of a subscription model, you might want to look at something like a range, so certain over time, a rolling retention. So maybe if you're not someone who has super frequent engagement, how do we think about those right moments to evaluate? And then maybe you're even looking at specific conversion factors like purchases. But all of this really comes down to how are we pulling in the right data to understand where a consumer is and what the factors might be that would indicate that they are either a healthy active customer or potentially at risk for churn. So there's a number of different ways that we're seeing brands tackle this. So certainly things like we could engage them directly and ask questions about what their preferences are, how do we want to follow up with them, soliciting feedback on what's working and what's not, or even conducting A/B testing to start to identify where are potential gaps. There are also a number of AI investments that are actually able to start to take a look at based on your personal consumer base. How can we start to evaluate and make predictions that this is a consumer or a consumer segment that might be at risk so that you can start to build marketing programs around that. From there, how do we want to start translating that into personalized and relevant experiences? And I don't think this surprises anyone, right? Consumers prefer personalized experiences. I thought this was interesting. 40% said it's only somewhat important, but another 40% said it's very important. So very few want a non-relevant experience or non-personalized experience, but at least the somewhat seems like something to dig into. And we took a look a little further on what they might do next as a result. So if they aren't receiving those personalized experiences, what are they looking for? They might consider other brands. They might just leave or maybe not actually make a purchase decision. I think what we're starting to hear in conversations is how do I balance maybe something that's personal but also helpful? So if it's personal and helpful to them, not just trying to push maybe a purchase acquisition, but providing information that's maybe useful to them or a tip along their journey is something that's maybe personalized and not the, hey, Kelsey, here's a product that maybe you want to buy, but hey, Kelsey, here's something that's relevant to you because I've seen that you're interested and I want to provide you this advice, or I want to provide you this piece of insight that might re-engage you with my brand. in general, I think these are the three ways that we start to think about how do you bring those tailored experiences to the right consumers. So things that are maybe timely. So if they do execute against something or take an action, bringing in that real-time insight so you can hit them and engage them in that right moment. Second, again, topical. So if they're saying that it's in the middle of summer, but it's in the middle of summer in another part of the world where summer's not that warm, that might be considering what we want to send them. And then again, that's valuable. So it doesn't necessarily have to be sending them something to purchase, but it could be something that's interesting or helpful. So from there, I did want to call out, again, there's a number of different ways that you can start to bring this to life, and there are different technologies you can use that start to drive some of the recommendations across there. So starting to bring in data and use those relevant experiences to make predictions, to start to more deeply segment. AI can help a lot here to help you do this at scale. So that's just we have to talk a little bit about AI. It's a tech conference, right? So that's where we see some of that coming in. But then lastly, and where I'll leave you before I turn things over to Sean, are things like how do you think about what's the relevant channel and what's the right place to engage them? So I thought some of these stats were interesting. So there's an over 50% lift in 90-day retention when you start to add additional channels to how you're engaging your consumer. So it's not just maybe directly engaging them in email, but if I engage them across multiple places, you're already going to start to see at least a 50% lift. We also see between different types of channels, so maybe in-product channels being things like a push notification or a card that's a banner within your product, or having out-of-product channels, so sending them an email, sending them a message. You can start to see that those are good by themselves, but they're even better when you start to blend them across the experience. So bringing in a diversity of when and how they're engaging with your brand can drive meaningful impact across that retention. And then lastly, this is just one more example of a brand average, what we're seeing. So this is brands who use just email to try to drive retention. And then these are brands who are using email, push notifications, SMS. And you can see that it's on average a 58% lift when they start to consider engaging not just in one channel, but across a wide range. So that's my brief stage setting. But what I want, actually I had one more. Sorry, one more slide. To walk through just a couple of use cases to engage, or a couple of pieces of advice to leave you with. So one is adding different use cases across those different stages, making sure that you're thinking about the frequency of when they're engaging with a product. This can also help then drive increased feature adoption. So as you think about the different channels, both in product and out of product, we can start to drive more breadth and adoption, and then certainly increasing the intensity. So how and when the depth of how they're using your solution. So if this is helpful, we actually have a whole guide on this that's really just digging into all things retention. It'll go much more in depth than I just went today, but I did want to flag that if this is of interest, we have a bunch of stats as well as some other use cases for how brands are tackling this today. But we all know that the real reason you're here is to hear from Sean. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, real quick to help you kind of understand how many people know what Bilt is. My ads. If you don't know what Bilt is, you're going to start getting my ads after today. And how many people use Braze or know Braze? Okay, so we do a little bit of jargon. Okay. So Bilt started about 3 years ago, and it was a simple value prop of earn points on events. It's a very simple value prop, right? But we've evolved quite a bit in the last 3 years, where we consider ourselves the loyalty platform to give you rewards and benefits at home, in your neighborhood, when you travel. So if you join Bilt now, you have a very different experience than if you joined Bilt when we took the waitlist down 3 years ago, and we had almost no features. It was basically just rent. We had very few partners. So there's kind of a bunch of questions when you think about how do we actually do that? How do we change the way that people engage with an app, activate on features they didn't come to an app for, right? Like most people didn't just come to Bilt to get points on Lyft. That is a nice to have. They came to get something out of rent. So how do we prioritize other features? How do you think about keeping the experience cohesive? How do you personalize it? And then how do you scale that? This is obviously a lot easier to do 3 years ago when there were like 10,000 people on the app, and now there's a few million, and it has a very different problem set. So how do we prioritize features? This was V1 3 years ago.
it was very linear. There was no data that went into it. It was just you sign up on day 1, you get this message. On day 3, you get this message. It was based off of what I thought was a good idea. There was absolutely no data that went into it because we were launching from 0, right? There was no data I could fall back on. So then we came out, once we started getting some data, once we started adding these features, we wanted to figure out how do we listen to what people are doing and then respond to that. So this is responsive as opposed to linear, but it's still not predictive in any way. And we'll talk about how we did this. And then now we're going more towards the predictive route. How can we steer people towards where we think you will be successful, where we think you will get enjoyment out of their product and get value, as opposed to, option 2 here was about when you take an action, how do I adapt my messages to what you've done? And I swear we'll go into more detail. All right, so the first thing we do is it's all about omni-channel, right? That's what this whole thing is about, is bringing an experience. Again, when you're a lifecycle marketer, I think you are an extension of the product team. Your job is to take the product and get that to a user when they aren't originally going to be using the app or features, right? So nudges, like letting them know. So if you don't have to book the reservation through Bilt to get extra points at Bilt. So you could show up at a restaurant and have no idea you're going to get bonus stuff, and you'll get this push notification from me telling you just got a ton of points. We have content cards, so the homepage of our app, the homepage of our website, a bunch of other places, all actually powered by me and by Braze. And so we can target to specific people, telling them to go check out restaurants that are near them if we think you're a high likelihood to convert on dining. And then, again, we'll get into the use cases and how, but we can run ads that match up so you're getting all 3 of these. So whether you're on our app, whether you're just doing something in life or you're on somebody else's app, I'm going to find you and I'm going to get my message to you. All right. Now that I'm holding the mic, I don't have my notes, so I'm just winging this. I don't remember what I was supposed to say here, but a bunch of things you do. You acquire, and then you activate, and then you make. So Canvas Flow is really the linchpin for all of this, though, right? So if you've been using Braze for a while, it used to be Canvas. Now it's Canvas Flow. It's much better. New paths and new steps that you can add in. But essentially, it allows us to do crazy stuff like this, where you can add different variants. So this is doing its own test for us about what is the right ranking of these. These are updating user attributes so that now I can say this person is getting this message, and I'm going to use that to trigger campaigns towards you, to add you to an audience, to run ads to you, and to make sure that your app experience is all around whatever this node happens to be. So I think this one's music, so we're going to talk to you all about music stuff. We're going to talk to you all about dining with this one, etc. And then you can see, once we add you to the audience here, it actually enters you into a whole new canvas. Again, we update a user profile here to say they're in a flow so that we can exclude them from all sorts of other messages. And this is what your journey might be. This is an email, app module, app module, app module, app module, decision, more emails, push, notifications. So we can, in one place, synchronize everything very, very fluidly. Braze, if you're using something else, maybe it's handlebars, whatever, you have some sort of use to personalize everything. And so this email, read at one of our partner restaurants, you can get this email. This is dynamically inserted to be the image from the restaurant's Google. This is all Liquid saying what the restaurant is, points you earned, all of that is dynamic. This link is going to be dynamic and take you to the right place. And all that's done through this Liquid logic where we have, you can modify data and so that the engineers can still send gobbledygook with a bunch of underscores and all caps and stuff, and I can turn it into something readable. We can add time, we can remove time. So Liquid's the first step. The second step is we use a feature called Cloud Data Ingestion. BigQuery directly to Braze. Our Braze thinks someone's we use the exact same data sources. The next is Braze has a feature called Connected Content, which allows you to make API calls inline. And so for things that are very real time, right? Like so Talon 1 is our rules engine for loyalty points and campaigns. I don't want to pay to update someone's profile in Braze every time they earn or use a point. That would be ridiculous. But I can make a very simple connected content called the talent and fetch your point balance. And then we can again partner that with Liquid and do conditional logic. We can insert what you have. We can pull your status. So we can now be hyper personalized in real time. And then we have a feature called catalogs, potentially in excess, but I love this because it allows my product marketing team to get in the mix without messing up anything that I'm setting up. So they can upload a CSV, and I can reference the copy, the images, the links, anything that we want, all managed separately in a CSV. If they want to change the copy, we don't have to go in and edit any code. We just re-upload a CSV or edit a single field in the catalog. The how do we scale it? We're still very much working out. I'm a lifecycle team of one, but someday we'll have to figure out how to do it for a big team. But it definitely all comes down to Braze, right? Like us being able to have everything in Braze as opposed to having to go to 5 different platforms, export a CSV from BigQuery, import it into Braze to update an attribute or make a segment. Like that's slow, time consuming, and you're gonna mess things up. Putting everything in one platform makes it very easy. It allows me to synchronize everything that we're doing across ad channels, across email, push, in-app message, text message, content cards, which just looks like native features. You can do direct with a partnership. You can fire a webhook to any other platform you want. So now you have one single flow where you can control everything. And then a couple other partners I want to highlight. This is Cotera, Cotera.co. They are the ones, if you want a data science partner as a marketing, sent you because attribution is important, not because you won't get a better deal or anything. Just people deserve to know how they acquired people. But talk to the Cotera team, where I talked about BigQuery. They don't need to plug Talon. But all these tools can plug in and push to Braze so that I have only one platform I have to spend my time on a day-to-day basis. Oh, man, this was a shorter deck than I remembered. I thought I was we'll go back. These are cool. Yep. But yeah, I mean, like, this is cool, right? Like, what other platform can you tie all this into and truly run ads where I'm now retargeting you for engagement features, right? Like, it's not just about acquisition. An ad channel is just a mechanism to communicate with people. And so you can build a custom audience in just any one of these steps. We could push to Google, we could push to TikTok, we can push to Meta. You build a custom audience, whether you want to include or exclude them, either way. But now we can have, so if we're going to keep pulling the dining example, I can run ads to you if we said that you're in this dining group. So now you're just getting restaurant ads about all the cool ways you can get value by being a Bilt member, whether you use the Bilt card or any other credit card that you want. All right, we'll catch up. So this was our use cycle when it was pretty simple. Oh, it didn't work on the projector. But you can kind of tell, right? Like, look at that. People are using the app now more than once a month. This is great. So I mean, again, people are here for Lyft, they're here for fitness, they're here for dining, they're here to book travel, to plan on buying a home, to build their credit, to play video games, all sorts of stuff. And this was a feature, we essentially have a one-click add your card as a default payment method for a bunch of things. This is what the engagement in that feature looked like when it was just a native feature and we weren't integrating it into all those flows. And this is what it looked like when I started integrating into all those flows, right? So by being across a bunch of channels, by leveraging ads to reinforce, by leveraging native and off-platform features to engage people and remind them